We have Brandon Handing here. He has been with the Nevada Department of Transportation for 10 years. Brandon is a current principal structures engineer over inspection and maintenance. Next, we have Herb McDowell. He serves as ITD's lead in bridge preservation activities. And then we have Chris Harden. Chris has been employed in the Bridge Bureau at the Montana Department of Transportation for 18 years and is currently the vice chair of the Western Bridge Preservation Partnership. And you guys are going to talk about bridge preservation or coatings or something, right?
We're going to talk about deck preservation treatments, what each of our states do. Start off, Idaho does very little in bridge maintenance from an internal maintenance standpoint. We do a little repairs and emergency fixes and such, but for the most part, any preservation activity is done directly through a contract. Our bridge construction budget each year is $85 million, about 15 of which goes to bridge preservation, so not a whole lot of money. Most all our preservation is done just with that $15 million. Some of the preservation activities do occur in the replacement, say PPC or something, during the original construction, but not very often. I'm going to just go through some of the treatments we use. Silanes, we don't use silanes too often on travel lanes. We do use it on our parapets, traffic facing curbs and such to protect those, and that's always just part of a contracted rehab project or overlay project. Deck sealing, we used to have a pretty robust deck sealing program via contracts, a handful of bridges in each of our 6 districts each year, but we've kind of got away from that and kind of shifted more to the epoxy overlays. As far as epoxy overlays go, we do a lot of epoxy overlays, generally bridge decks in good condition. We've kind of gone to a 2-phase approach. For higher ADT areas, we require calcined bauxite aggregate for our epoxy overlays. And then in our lower ADT areas, we just use a more traditional aggregate. PPC, we use a fair bit of PPC. Again, bridges in good condition. Urban areas, heavy traffic areas where we don't want to get back out there anytime soon. We want something that's going to last 25, 30 years. We also use it on all our bridges where the top of the girder acts as the wearing surface, so deck bulb tees, voided slabs, we immediately go on with a PPC on those as a wearing surface. We're getting away from AC overlays, asphalt overlays, kind of headed more towards a PPC. We still do them occasionally. When we do, we run the spray applied waterproofing membrane with that, with the embedded aggregates, and that seemed to work out pretty well for us. And then lastly, we our structural concrete overlays. We allow both silica fume and latex modified, but all we ever see is the silica fume. Generally, these structures are in poor condition. We use hydrodemo to remove the bad concrete. The overlays generally come with shrinkage cracks, so we program an epoxy overlay on those structures about 1 to 2 years after the construction. And then generally, we're taking care of our substructure issues and joint rehab and such with these types of preservation projects.
I'm Brandon from Nevada. So our bridge maintenance is, we're split up into 3 districts. A lot of the projects that they do are mostly done through contracts. They do some emergency repairs. Say a snowplow takes out a joint header, steel header, which seems to happen up here in the north a lot. They'll do a quick repair. They've started up here in the north kind of doing that more as a contract on-call basis. And then we get about $10 million a year for our bridge program. And so that a lot of that is put to bridge replacements and then to the inspections. The districts help out with a little bit. I know in District 2 where I came from, on my bridge maintenance experience, we spent about $2 million a year on bridge preservation treatments. So a lot of the treatments we would be doing is polymer concrete overlays. And we had, especially on the I-80 corridor, I don't know if you didn't drive through Reno, I-80 is kind of our main corridor, high truck traffic, and it takes you into California. And then if you go east, it's going towards Utah. So we have been grinding down to the top of the rebar mat and then dragging the entire deck and identifying any extra D-lams and having them chip that out and then paving him back. We were under tight time constraints, so we normally had 8 hours to do the work. So that means setting traffic control and everything. So we were using polymer and made for a tight shift. And one of our contractors here in Reno actually developed like a paver that could do polymer. So that really helped with the whole process. We got really into multi-layers or epoxy overlays. We've used flint rock, Oregon emery, and steel slag, and then we eventually went to the bauxite. We were testing yearly our skid values, and the bauxite just kind of gave us the best product moving forward. And then right now, the spec is getting modified for also high friction surface treatment for on curves. They're moving towards more of an automated system. Before it was either mixing in buckets or with pump trucks and people out there with squeegees. So we're trying to move more to automated so we can get a longer life cycle of those. The biggest issues with our multi-layers, especially if we place them on the I-80 corridors, they wedge out at the wheel pass just because we have so many trucks. We have a handful of asphalt bridges. We do a waterproofing membrane over the top of them. We have had some failures with that, just not getting the waterproofing to bond to the asphalt. It's happened up here in the north and then also in the south. We do use polymer for a lot of our joint replacements when we're taking out, and then also for patching.
Montana, make sure it's on. Very similar to these guys. We don't have an in-house maintenance crew. We have 2 employees that cover the whole state. They mainly are very reactive. It's just fixing emergencies. A header comes loose or something needs to be fixed immediately. They'll go out and do it. We deliver all of our maintenance, preservation, deck preservation through design, bid, build. We do some alternative contracting, some job order contracting. We're trying that. So very similar to what these other states are seeing. I'm jealous of Brandon and having real crews and stuff. That's pretty nice. The types of treatments we do, like we talked about earlier with the silane, on new bridge decks, 28 days, we'll put a silane sealer on there. We'll visibly treat any larger cracks with a healer sealer at that point, hand applied. When it comes to rehabilitations, our biggest practice is the thicker modified concrete overlay. And just like Herb said, we allow latex modified as well as silica fume, but due to cost, we haven't seen a latex modified one come through our state in years. We do a lot of the thin polymer overlays too. We've done, in the last 4 or 5 years, we've done, 150 to 200 at this point. We've been working with those quite a bit. We're just kind of diving into those PPC, the polyester polymer overlays. We've got 4 that have been placed so far. 3 were done in 2014 as part of an experimental project. And then we just did one last fall on one half of a bridge, and then we're doing the other half this summer. We do a lot of healer sealers. That's probably the closest thing we have to preventative maintenance, is that we've been able to work with a lot of our road projects. If we have a road project coming through a corridor and there's bridges that are in good condition, that this would be a good treatment, they'll throw a healer sealer in on there. So that's the closest thing we have to a preservation. Everything else is pretty much reactive. And then asphalt, similar to everybody else, we have asphalt overlay bridges out there. They're few and far between, especially with concrete. We try to avoid them, not just for some of the issues of water and, all the all the other issues that come with that, but also inspection. Our bridge inspectors don't like having that asphalt overlay because they can't see the deck. So that's kind of our practices in Montana. I was going to ask you, Brandon, like you said, you've got in-house crews. What's the scope of the work they do for you guys?
We have a crew. Our state's broken up into 3 districts. So we have a 3-man crew up here in the north, in this Reno area. we have a crew in the Elko area. They've kind of been morphed into also a stormwater crew. So, and then we have a crew down south in the Vegas area, and I believe they have around 6 people. All right. Yeah. So, and so a lot of it is if we get when we go out there doing an inspection, if there's something that needs to be immediately addressed and it's something they can do, we will contact them and say, hey, can you guys get this addressed? And then they would notify us when they fix that. And otherwise there'd be a contract or something like that. So they would have to do like, not necessarily an emergency contract, but like a 3-quote bid as long as it was under $250,000. So, and the north up here in the Reno area is mostly everything is being contracted out. So they kind of just manage all the contracts. And so, and they've kind of morphed into also doing pothole repairs on the roadways. And and they just have an on-call contractor that comes out and does that stuff. So, and that was actually the crew I was on before, about 5 years ago now. So, but we at that time we contracted out the major overlays and water, multi-layers and bridge preservation type techniques, and then any of the emergency stuff we would go out there and actually cut out the joints and just form back, and then we would put out a contract to actually do a full joint replacement or something like that. So
I got a question too. You said you do concrete removal and then placed an overlay back, polymer overlay. Are you guys considering polymer overlay structural for those structures or bridges?
we're just basically considering as a wearing surface. So just to protect the deck. So
I was going to say too, we don't consider structural that polyester polymer. Yeah, just a wearing surface.
I guess this is less preservation and more new construction, but Herb, you mentioned precast elements with PPC overlays. So, you know, we're still seeing a ton of local agencies put asphalt on these things, and I'd love to see more PPC on these. I'm just curious for all three of you, if you're doing this in your states, how thick is that overlay that you're putting down, and are you reinforcing that at all, or is it unreinforced? And then are you seeing any kind of longitudinal cracking in those overlays?
I haven't seen any longitudinal cracking. Generally, we use UHPC for the closure pour of those elements, and then grinding off that overbuild of whatever it's a 1/4 inch or so, and then putting the PPC directly down 3/4 inch, and that take care of our wearing surface issues.
yeah, we're doing an inch or 2 inches, and we just started doing 2 inches for some of the I-80 corridor, so where we're having high truck traffic. So, but we aren't reinforcing or anything like that.
The few we've done, I think they've been about 3/4. I think through some of the research I've seen, it's come up to almost an inch or an inch and a half in spots, filling in low spots. But it's actually a good idea. With we leave most of our decks bare when we have our precast or bolt tees, tri-beams. We do a lot of voided slabs in our state. But I never thought of doing that. I think it'd be a good idea. Yeah, the talk to our performance, people can get with me later if they want more information, but we've actually done a really good job of documenting the wearing of these PPCs and these thin polymer overlays for the last 5-6 years now. We've been tracking them since 2014, and the PPCs have held up really, really well. They naturally have a little bit of wear surface, in the driving paths and such, but no debonding issues. The only issues is the plows, I think, is what's catching it at the end, is we need to find better transitions to protect that PPC. I actually have a photo in one of the reports that shows a huge chunk, and the bond between the PPC and the concrete doesn't break. It's the concrete and the top mat and the reinforcing. So there's a big section of you can see the whole chunk of the rebar sitting down there. So we've had good luck with those. I did mention this with the thin polymer overlays. We've been getting basalt exclusively. We don't spec bauxite at this point. We've had a couple bridges done with a natural calcized bauxite that's out of Wyoming, and they did a few, and we didn't notice a significant difference in our skid numbers from that in the basalt. So one thing we have noticed, though, is that we've been getting a lot of loss of aggregate in some of our higher traffic areas or higher snowplow areas, studded tire areas, that it's not as much that we've had a little bit of polishing. We've actually lost the aggregate from the epoxy. It's broken out. So we're not quite in some of those higher traffic areas seeing the performance we were hoping. I mean, this is 3-4 years into some of these overlays, and we were hoping to get, 6 to 8 was our goal before we resurfaced them. So that's one thing we're trying to kind of figure out on what's causing that. We've got some theories, like I said, plow abrasion, higher traffic, studded snow tires, but we actually are just in the process of starting another experimental project to dig into that a little bit better and see if we can come up with a solution, not just to why we're having some of these issues, to better spec what treatments are better in the right location based on traffic and weather and things like that.
Curious, this is more of a maintenance question, but I figured I'd ask. The crews that are applying kind of salts and road salts and what have you had interaction with them, and have they come up with kind of best practices, or any best practices you could share about that, what you've learned with working with them? Again, it's not really the preservation piece, but it's more of the application of the road salts and what have you.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I'd never really thought of. No, in Montana we haven't really. We're completely independent of maintenance activities and what kind of chemicals. If they're using sand, they're using salt. I know they vary by region, and I think it's more of a cost issue more than actual preservation of the bridge decks and stuff. But no, that's a good point. I never thought of that. Might be something to have a conversation with our maintenance folks about.
Are you suggesting not using salt as a preservation activity? No, we haven't had, the bridge section hasn't had discussions with maintenance to that regard in Idaho.
For state of Washington, we try to use the minimum amount. It's really not very much if they do it correctly. We try to pre-treat, because that means you can take care of it earlier. Again, a minimum amount. And the crews are checked on how much they actually put out. And we keep, yes, they are. So I forget what it is. If you look at it and they put it on a piece of paper, you can hardly see the amount they're putting down if they're doing it correctly. But you can also do a surge, and we find some operators like to do that a lot. The crews try to do their best, and if they get out there ahead of time so that the snow or whatever else doesn't bond to the pavement, and then they can hit it with a plow, they do a pretty good job. We use salt. Some places they use brine. We use wetted salt.
We use a brine before, but we don't have that communication with maintenance. When I was at district, we really tried to emphasize picking up the blades before they came to the skewed bridges, but they continued to hit them and tear out joints. So,
for your polymer overlays, do you typically use epoxy, or do you ever use the methyl methacrylate-based technologies?
In Idaho, we're strictly epoxy overlays.
I believe we have one methacrylate on the QPL, but I think we only have 3 companies on the QPL, so it's just whatever the contractor picks at the time. So
Yeah, we give the contractor the option as well to choose between the 2 materials, but we exclusively see epoxy. We haven't seen methacrylates in a long time.
Well, I guess the question I have is that when you're talking these preservation treatments, is it all done under contract for most of the states? I mean, for your 3 states, it's all done under contract. Is that what the other states are doing also? How about Washington, Chris?
Yeah, Tim, if you look at all our 13 western states, I think we have 4 states that actually have bridge crews. So there was 9 that contract everything out pretty much. So it's only Washington, Oregon, California, and Alaska that actually have bridge crews.
So when it comes to bridge preservation, then do you use the ratings then to determine which ones get preservation, or is it all just, I hate to use the word Band-Aid, but are we just fixing the emergency stuff, or is there a plan for those 4 bridges to get in that rotation?
Not in Montana. It's all reactive. The only thing, like I said earlier, the only semblance of a preventive maintenance program we have is trying to do some of those healer sealers. And I'll look at the projects within the corridor and determine if they're a good candidate, if they don't have any patches or delaminations and spalls. But, Yeah, on ours, we don't have a maintenance plan like going ahead. We're really trying to develop one. We're getting some new software to help us get a little better idea on what's a good treatment at the right time. But at this point, we don't have anything concrete.
In Idaho, we try to get a preservation project for each of the 6 districts, including, this might include, 5 to 10 structures a year that get preservation treatment. We have a 7-year program, so we're able to look forward and try to address certain structures and then try to work on a certain corridor or bundle projects within a certain area in each of those districts, and decide on which structures get preservation that way.
Ours is a lot of reactive, but also we try to attach to any roadway projects coming through that a bridge is nearby. And then when I was at our district here locally, we had a plan. We were reviewing the inspection reports and we were prioritizing projects. But that was about 5 years ago, and the crews have changed. So, and it's not. I think a lot of what we left they continued with, but I don't know where it's going right now.
I'm John Gillis with California. We mentioned we do have bridge crews, but they don't do the deck preservation activities. We always contract that work out. And annually we put projects together to address deck preservation. So we'll pick up any decks that are identified by our investigative staff and put those into projects annually.
Yeah, I'll kind of repeat what we said in the DEX group yesterday. Oregon, we have kind of a phased approach. We have a really tight loop between our regional bridge inspectors and bridge crews, and some maintenance funds are used to put down epoxy deck seals. That's usually driven by cracking that's observed, and Travis will support some of that with major bridge maintenance funds, put down some of those epoxy deck seals. Some of that's done by the bridge crews, some of that's contracted out. And I'll put deck seals in quotes because it wears out in the wearing surface, but it fills the cracks really nicely, and that's really the goal of that product. And then we have everything from that all the way up to deck replacement, depending on the severity of what's happening. Most of it's reactionary rehabilitation, but when we're out there doing projects on a deck, there are parts of a project that are preservation efforts that are attached to a larger project. We will put down thin bonded wearing surface PPC as part of a larger project as a holistic approach. Say we're widening a deck, we're doing something, we're replacing a parapet or something. While we're doing that, we will do a preservation activity because we already have a project out there, and it makes sense to preserve the structure in other ways.
So thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate you sharing.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.